Welcome everyone. I appreciate y'all being here. Today I'm going to show you how to 3D model a generic object in ZBrush. First thing I'm going to do, obviously, is open up ZBrush. This might not be an object that you're interested in 3D modeling for yourself, but there's going to be a lot of techniques that I use that'll be really beneficial to you in the future. First thing I'm going to do is just grab a flat plane out of the Lightbox menu. Once that opens up, I'm going to go down to the Initialize tab and select Q plane, Q grid, just standard default settings, and that will open up a 4 polygon square that I'm going to end up using. Next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and get my photo image, reference image that I'm going to be utilizing for this 3D model, kind of get it situated a little bit better. I'm going to open up Photoshop, import that photo in, and kind of adjust it a little bit so that it can be more centered in the middle of my background so that I can overlay the model that I'm going to be working on and use it, to get a better reference image and kind of better placement for the objects on the model. If you're not familiar with Photoshop, this isn't necessarily something that you need to know how to do. I just, try to orient my model in a little better position so that whenever I am working on that model, the image is where I need it to be so that I can keep referring back to it. Just going to adjust it, grab the ruler, place it along the top of the photo there so it's parallel with the top of the workspace. Grab one on the side, adjust it a little bit. As you can see here on my screen, I'm tracking key clicks. So if at any time you're wondering what type of hotkeys I'll be utilizing for ZBrush, it'll show right there in that gray overlay box. Occasionally I will tell you what my key clicks are, but for the most part, if you're interested in knowing what the key clicks are, then they will be located right there in the bottom right hand corner of the screen. This tutorial isn't necessarily for me to teach you what key clicks to press, although the references are there. I won't necessarily speak up about them. This is a tutorial that's showing you how to model an object, not necessarily showing you how to utilize ZBrush. There's plenty of tutorials out there on how to utilize ZBrush on a basic level, how to navigate the menus, how to turn the model and stuff like that. So I won't necessarily be going into that. This is more of an example on how to create the object that you're trying to create. So what I did, I went up to the image tab on the top and I dragged it down to the left hand menu by hitting the arrows on the left hand side. What I'm doing now is locating the image that I just adjusted and I'm placing it in my workspace. I expanded the menu and I'm adjusting the size of the image, and then I'm also, you can see that it's back there behind my square that I have there. What I'm going to do now is change the opacity, so that I can see it behind my object that I'm going to be working on. And then I'll adjust my object to where it's about where I want it as far as the size and shape is in reference to the image behind it. And then I'm going to store that view. All right, so now what I'm going to do is, you can kind of see on the bottom side of this, I'm using the Zmodeler menu. It's just a brush on the bottom of my screen. I will put a link to my UI setup down below in the description of the video. If you're trying to insert lines, what you're trying to do, multiple lines, you can hover over, hit the space bar, and then you can use that to make the selections that you want. So I select multiple lines, and then I am dragging, clicking and holding with the left mouse button, as you can see, that little red indicator on the mouse in the middle of my screen. And I'm dragging that to represent the lines that are at the bottom of this object that I'm creating. This is a little med kit that's utilized in the game. And I've kind of got a secret project that I'm working on. Not necessarily a secret, but anyway, what I'm doing in the ZBrush menu is establishing the basic shapes of this object, and then I'm going to extrude them based upon where the edge lines are and the poly loops are, just inserting new lines, getting the outside dimensions, the width, and so on, and then I'll show you how to extrude those and make the shape that I want from them. So I kind of got an idea of how it's going to work. I lined up those multiple poly loop lines on the bottom half of the model where I wanted them to go. Now I'm going to select Polygroup All. I'm going to go up to the top of my menu and I'm going to select Auto Group so that it turns the entire model into one singular polygroup color. Then I'm going to hover over a blank polygon. I'm adjusting the image so that I know that it's right where I want it to be centered in the screen whenever I refer back to it. Just removes the image, clicks a different view so that I don't have any obstructing my view on the background. I'm going to hover over a polygon and I'm going to left click and drag. And since I have that selection made with to extrude the polygons, then I can just select. You know what I should really do? I should narrate this as I'm 3D modeling it. A lot of times I just kind of get in the zone and I forget to narrate it. I need to just narrate it as I'm 3D modeling it, but man, when I'm trying to concentrate on what I'm 3D modeling, it gets old trying to concentrate on narrating it. So all I did was use QMesh to extrude out the plane to where I gave it some thickness. Now what I'm doing is holding down Control and highlighting what I want to extrude next. What highlighting does is holding down Correction, not Control, it's Alt, is highlighting an area and temporarily changing the poly group that area is, and then I can select that area separately from the rest of the model and extrude it out. That's all I did right there by clicking and left clicking, holding, and dragging. Here again, I'm highlighting, and I'm gonna left click and hold to drag that out. Looks like I'm going to insert a new line. Yes, all I did was hover over a poly loop until it turned white and left clicked, and what that is doing is dragging a new poly loop line. Okay, now I've got that little gap in between the two selections, and then I left clicked and hold and dragged out using QMesh, and I extruded that even more. That's how you can select different areas. Now I'm increasing the resolution to a higher resolution, now back down to low. The reason why I do that is I'm just kind of observing what it's going to look like whenever it's in high resolution. And what that does is curves the edges of the model rather than just being in a sharp 90-degree angle. When you increase the resolution, it gives you more of an accurate view of what the model is going to look like whenever you have it in the final resolution. All I'm doing right now is adjusting my UI. Whenever ZBrush updated to 2021 version, I some reason lost my UI layout. I don't know if it was because of the update that they did or if it was because of me rotating my hard drives and kind of cleaning up my hard drive space, but either way, I redid my UI. It's pretty similar to the one that I used to use, but if you are interested in it, I will put it in the description below the video. Now I'm just hovering over the lines and creating a perpendicular inserted line using the insert tool. The reason why I did that is because If I insert a new line from the edge that I'm trying to extrude, what that will do is create a limit. So whenever I extrude a new area, it will only extrude up to that next poly loop line point. You'll know what I mean once you start to do it. So now what I'm doing is highlighting those areas where I inserted those multiple edge loops earlier, because there are a couple, I think five ridges that are on the front bottom side of this 3D model that I'm going to go ahead and extrude out. So then I'm going to hover over those highlighted points using QMesh. I'm going to left click and drag out to approximately the thickness that I want those to extrude. And I think that looks pretty good. Now, when I'm 3D modeling, I'm constantly rotating around that 3D model just to view the 3D model and the new extrusions that I've done throughout the entire modeling process, because it might look good from one angle, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to look good from another angle. So I'm constantly, zooming in, zooming out, rotating around, and that's just part of 3D modeling. Now what I'm going to do is I've kind of got an indentation on the top part above this medical cross, and I'm going to highlight a new point and squish that back down, I guess a negative extrusion, so that I can get the overall shape of this object adjusted. Now you can see that I created a limit with that new poly loop, and then I highlighted that area and pushed back into the model, and it completely removed it. The Zmodeler brush is really a powerful tool that ZBrush has. You can utilize it in many ways to get really intricate shapes and stuff like that. But I like to get the base shape of all my 3D models using the Zmodeler brush, because it's just a lot easier. But not only that, you can utilize it in other ways too. So I have different stages of files that I save for all my 3D models. So as I'm working through here, I'm just going to kind of talk through a few things and a little bit of my mindset behind using the Zmodeler brush. You can drag out exact planes and surfaces and generic shapes like this cylinder right here, and you can adjust them by moving them around and moving them into the correct position comparatively to the other models that you have in the workspace. You can adjust them by scaling them down, but then you can also manipulate the lines to get more accurate shapes. It's almost like, I consider it a geometric way, since we can't necessarily use measurements in ZBrush. This is, a kind of a way, not necessarily using measurements, mathematical measurements, but modeling in a similar way to something like Fusion360 or a program similar to that, where you can input measurements and so on, with the generic shapes and stuff like that. So that's what I consider the Zmodeler brush. It's kind of similar. So I get the overall generic shape of the object that I'm trying to model, and then I can adjust it from there into a higher resolution and do more of an organic sculpting. So now that I've got the generic shape, the general shape of the case of the med kit, I'm going to open up Fusion360, and I'm going to create this text. There might be a way of creating text inside. So there is a way of creating text inside of ZBrush using alphas and stuff like that. I'm not a 100% expert using ZBrush. There's so many things that you can do in ZBrush that I just haven't discovered all of it yet, haven't learned all of it yet. So I'm going to utilize Fusion360 and Inkscape to get the font that I want, or at least close to the font that I want. And you can kind of see here, this font is pretty similar to what is on the case of the model that we're working with here. I'm going to scale that down and kind of get it as close to the size of the larger font on the front of this case. And if you're not familiar with Inkscape, there's plenty of Inkscape tutorials out there. It's not necessarily how everyone would do what I'm trying to do, but it's how I do it. Everybody has their own different types of workflow. And the more that you utilize ZBrush and utilize other programs in conjunction with ZBrush, you'll kind of develop your own workflow. But these are programs that I've used for many years, so Inkscape is a good asset to use to get font and text and things like that. So I'm going to get this adjusted and get it about where I want it. I'm going to draw out another bit of text here. Same font that I'm going to end up utilizing, just scale it down to where it's a little bit smaller. As you can see, the N's and the R's aren't backwards the way that they are in the Russian language. I don't have a Russian keyboard. I don't really have the time to sit here and do the translation and all that stuff. I just wasn't going to have time to do that. So I'm utilizing assets that I do have available. And once I extrude these inside of Fusion360, then I will export them out of Fusion360. I will turn them into a solid. Then I will import them into ZBrush, and I'll have those exact text assets that I can then manipulate inside of ZBrush. All right, now that we're back in Fusion360, I'm going to locate the files on my PC, grab that SVG file that I just created in Inkscape, open it up, scale it up to the size that I need, rotate it, and kind of get it into position. It's not absolutely necessary to get it into the exact position in relation to the image on the background here. But if I'm always double checking the size of the assets that I'm working with, then it's more likely that I'm going to have them as close as possible whenever I import them into ZBrush, so that I don't have to essentially make more work for myself, not double checking these assets as I go along. So now all I'm going to do is select the area, kind of get an idea of how thick I want the text to be. A little more thick than what I want. There we go. We went down to 0.1, and I'm going to do the same here. Extrude 0.1. Hit OK. Now I'm going to select both of these objects, both of these sets of text, and then I'm going to hit 3D print button. It's going to open up Mesh Mixer. Make sure that I double select or select them again. There we go. They are all selected. Hit OK. That's automatically going to open up the program Mesh Mixer. If you're not familiar with the Mesh Mixer and Fusion360, again, there's multiple tutorials out there on how to utilize it. I'm going to go to Edit Mode, and I'm going to go to Make Solid, select Accurate, turn up the density and pixels, hit Update. What that's going to do is make a nice, clean selection of my text. I'm going to delete that negative, and then I'm going to go to Export. I'm going to save the file to where it needs to be on my PC, and name the file. Name it whatever you want. Not test, meant to be text, and then I'm going to save it. Now, once this is saved as an OBJ, then I can reopen ZBrush and import it into ZBrush. And I will show you how to do that here in just a few seconds. There are a lot of things that I didn't cut out of this process, and the reason why is because I wanted to show you my workflow. And whenever I edit a lot of my videos and stuff like that, you're missing out on that workflow. And I want to make sure that I show you every aspect of how and what I do in order to achieve what I want to achieve. I'm just going to pull out a cube here. I'm going to select that cube. I'm going to, I think I rotate the model. Yeah, I squish it down. Yeah, not absolutely necessary what I'm doing right now as far as grabbing this out. You can grab out any model off of the append in the subtool list over there. All I did was go to append and select a generic model. Then I'm going to find my file when it's selected in the subtool list, and that's going to import that and replace that generic model that I had. Okay, and that's how you can import an OBJ into ZBrush. Now I'm going to select the move and rotate tool, and I'm going to kind of adjust that, the size of that text in relation to the objects that I've already 3D modeled. I'm just rotating and turning and looking at the same time so that I can get it in the correct position so that I can scale the text down to the correct size that I need. All right, let's get it zoomed back in here. And it's relatively close to the place that I wanted. I will adjust it later on in the video in order to get it exactly where I need it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to auto group all this text, okay? The reason why I'm going to do that, I'm going to group split that text so that they're individual subtools on the subtool list. The reason why is because I want to edit this in so it looks more accurate to the image that I'm modeling it to. The in, I don't know if it's an in Russian, if it makes the same sound or anything like that, but the letter that I'm trying to create right here looks more like a lowercase n in the English alphabet. So I'm just adjusting it by masking off different areas, hiding the point that is not masked, and I'm deleting the hidden point, and then I am closing the holes. That's what that is up on the top of my UI. It says hide point, delete hidden, close holes. And that's just a quick way of selecting things with the mask by holding down Control and dragging over that area that of the object you're messing with. See, now you can see that I have just that little tiny area that is unmasked. And what I'm going to do is select the move tool. I'm going to hit the navigation point, and what that's going to do is go directly to that place that I have unmasked on that object. Just adjust the move tool so that it's on the object that I'm working with rather than somewhere else on the screen. And it's not working exactly the way that I want, because whenever I deleted that area by hide point, delete hidden, and closing the hole on that object, it needs to be remeshed. Okay, it needs to either be Z remeshed, or I need to do redynamesh, because you can see that the polygons in that area are not very consistent. They're all random shapes. So I'm going to Z remesh this with a decently high resolution. I'm actually going to click on double, I believe I decide to do. Turn down the curve strength, click on double, and then I'm going to redynamesh that. That didn't work, so now I'm going to Z remesh, and it will change those polygons to more of a symmetrical polygon shape, you know, just a bunch of different squares. And now what I'm going to do is re-highlight over the area. For some reason my mask tool is not working right now. I needed to go down and select it and go to rectangle, and I don't know how it ended up getting jacked up, but it was probably something that I misclicked. Every once in a while, you know, little things like that will happen in ZBrush, and because I didn't go to a formal ZBrush school or program or something like that, sometimes I mess things up, and it's just troubleshooting, trying to fix it. But that'll come whether or not you go to a formal school or not. There'll always be things you got to troubleshoot and figure out. So now I'm just holding down Control and Alt to remove the mask that I had already created. Okay, and then I just want that little bit of an area selected. I'm going to go back up to the Move tool, hit the navigation to pop it back over there, and now we got more of a clean extrusion. And then I'm going to remove the Move tool. I'm going to re-Dynamesh the object, and it will clean it up. And now those are welded together, and they're all one piece. Definitely didn't want to Dynamesh. I'm going to increase the resolution up to about 13 to 1600. I can't see the numbers while I'm narrating this. But anyway, so I re-Dynameshed that, and now it's all one solid piece. I'm going to do the same thing with this number 4, because this isn't the type of 4 on the object that I'm trying to model here. So I'm going to remove this 45-degree angle and make it 2 upright posts, almost like a football field goal. I'm going to highlight that area that I want to get rid of, just like I did on the in. And to select the inverse, you hit Control-I. Let's see here. Control-I, just like I did just then. And I'm going to go back up to the top where it's hide point, delete hidden close holes. Okay. So now you can see that I have that completely removed. And what I'm going to do is duplicate this one vertical upright by selecting that individually, turning it into its own subtool by group mask. Now, I kind of misclicked there. I did that a little bit too quick. I'm going to have to go back over to the subtool. I'm going to have to merge those down. You'll see me click through the subtool list, and I'm like, what is going on at this point? What did I do? Misclicked. I haven't 3D modeled in about a month or so, and whenever you're not constantly using ZBrush, and since that time is when they came out with the new update, so a few things have changed. Anyway, I'm kind of remembering, I guess is the best way to say it, on how to do this. So what I'm going to do is remerge those 2 objects that I split. Still trying to troubleshoot what's going on here. And now even looking at the subtool list, sitting here narrating this, I'm like, come on, Jake, you can't be that slow. Anyway, oh, there it is. Now I'm realizing that I've got them split and I need to merge them back down. You see how there's an empty hole on the side there? That's not what we want. So there we go. I'm going to merge down to combine those 2 parts back again. Now you see that they're combined again. I will go back to auto group and auto group. There we go. Get a little bit closer to what I want. So now I'm going to increase the resolution, hit re-Dynamesh, and then I'm going to, I believe, auto group again. Yep, I ended up auto grouping. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to reselect this with a mask by holding down Control, clicking and dragging over the area that I want to select. And then I'm going to group masked, and then I'm going to group split. So that split it in the way that I wanted it to. Okay, so now I duplicated that subtool on the subtool list. I'm going to turn off solo so that I can see all the objects that I'm trying to manipulate here. I'm going to hit the pin tool, the pin drop tool, okay, navigation pin drop. I'm going to select that upright fork and move it over into the area that I want it to be in because of the type of 4 that I'm trying to create. You see that I was trying to take away that 45-degree angle and create 2 uprights. Okay, there we go. Now I'm going to, for some reason my mask tool is not working again. It decides to work, it doesn't work, just silliness. Anyway, I ended up, turning ZBrush off and turning it back on, and then ended up fixing the problem. But for some reason it was giving me fits yesterday. So that's why I'm trying to troubleshoot and drag off the object. Because if you're trying to clear a mask, you click and Control, left click off the object that you're trying to manipulate, and then you can draw a rectangle, but it's not working. And that's the troubleshooting that I'm doing right now. All right, finally got what I wanted selected. And then I'm going to use the move tool to drag down into the other object, the bottom part of the 4. And I didn't hit the edit button coming out of move, so I duplicated the object. You can hit Control N, it will clear the workspace of any drawings that you've made, and then you can get rid of that and come back to your edit mode. All right, now that I have all those selected, what I'm going to do is merge all those together. On the subtool list, merge down, you can see there's 4 different parts of the number 4, or 3 different parts of the number 4. I re-Dynamesh, I hit auto group, now it's all one piece, and the 4 is edited the way that I want it to be. So now I've got to move on and do that exact same process with the other text, the subtext that's down below, the smaller text. I will do that. And now that you have seen me do it on the larger text, I don't necessarily need to narrate it on the smaller text. So I'm going to go ahead and fast forward here. And all I'm doing is the exact same thing as what I did on the large text, just for a couple different letters. All right, the next thing I'm going to do here is just adjust the text so I can make sure that they're centered in, in the right position that I want them to be on the front of this case here. I'm going to get the subtext all centered up. I'm going to get the main text all centered up. I'm going to get it adjusted. And on the surface of the case where I want it, takes me a little bit of time, but using the move tool, I like the new move tool comparatively to ZBrush 2017 move tool and the older versions and stuff like that. It's a lot easier to use in my opinion. Anyway, I've got the floor on with the x-axis line on, X and Y, so that I can see where the center is and so on. And then I'm going to get the cylinder adjusted as well here in a few minutes, and then I'm going to work on the medical cross. Again, I have a lot of back and forth that I do, you know, zoom in, zoom out, change the opacity of the model so that I can see the reference image back behind. I'll turn the model, move the tool, you know, use the move tool. And there's just a lot of steps. I mean, I'd love to say that I can go through this faster, and some models I can create pretty quickly. This video I'm showing you right here was maybe a matter of 2 hours or so to 3D model this entire object, and I'm sure there's people that can go faster out there. People that do this all day, every day, and at some points throughout the year I do 3D models all day, every day, but just with everything that's been going on in the world and stuff like that, I've had other obligations to take care of, and I love creating 3D models, but I'm not as quick as what I used to be, and as fast as I am whenever I am doing models day in and day out. So I'm just increasing the resolution here and back down to a low resolution, kind of to get an idea of how this cylinder is going to react at a higher resolution. Now I'm going to get it sunk into the case of the model, more relative to where I want it to be whenever the model is finished. I'm going to end up 3D printing this with my resin 3D printer when it's all said and done. So I do want it to stick out a decent amount, but not too much, because it's actually going to be really small whenever it's all finished. So I'm using the grid lines on the reference image on the canvas to line up all the objects to the right, you know, the same grid line. Tedious work, and I realize that probably many of y'all don't need to be shown how to do this, but editing it out might not be good for some people. Just to, again, see the workflow and start the finish of a 3D model so you can see all different aspects and my button clicks and my UI and how I interact with the model and so on. I'm just trying to keep it as intact as possible. I think I'll do some live streams at some point so that people can tune in and watch me 3D model exactly. You know, one of my most utilized hotkeys in ZBrush is Control Z. Control Z, Control Shift Z, just to undo, redo. And, you know, just seeing how this works, how this doesn't work, some troubleshooting, because ultimately what it comes down to is there's many different ways of doing things in ZBrush, and how I do it might not be how somebody else does it. What I tend to do is try to make my life as easy as possible based upon what I know rather than maybe the more accurate way of achieving something because I know it. And although there might be a more accurate way and ultimately a faster way of doing something, I tend to keep going back to the types of 3D modeling and the types of techniques that I know how to do for myself. All I'm doing right now is getting this cylinder ready and at a high resolution so that I can manipulate it with the mask tool in order to create the medical cross that I want to overlay on this. I'm periodically throughout this video adjusting my UI, so if you see me go up to preferences and config and stuff like that, if you see me searching through menus, it's because the buttons that I used to have on my UI so that I didn't have to go search through menus all the time aren't there anymore. And throughout this entire video, I've been adjusting my UI every once in a while. And that's what I'm doing right now is I believe I'm looking for maybe something to do with Dynamesh or increase resolution or something like that. Can't remember what I'm looking for at this point, but bear with me. I mean, it's just part of the process. And like I said, I'll have an updated version downloadable of my UI in the description below if y'all are interested. Oh, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for whenever you increase the resolution by Control D, by increasing the subdivisions of the model. When you go to higher resolution or lower resolution, you can actually delete those lower resolutions or delete the higher resolutions. And that's what I was looking for. And I just found them and put them over there on the left-hand side. I couldn't remember. I modeled all this yesterday, and so I just couldn't remember what point of the video I was at there. All right, so I increased the resolution. I went to Dynamesh. I think I end up turning off the polyframe mode. Yeah. And now I'm going to use the mask tool to create this cross. You could do this in another way. So what I could do is I could go into Fusion360, sketch a cross geometrically, with measurements and stuff like that and get exact. But I didn't think that it was absolutely necessary. What I'm going to do is turn on the symmetry mode by the transform tab, activate symmetry. And then I'm going to use the mask tool to create the cross on the front of this cylinder. If you see that I switched out of the ZBrush mode right there and went to the standard brush, it's because when you're in ZBrush mode, even if you don't have polyframe mode on, it's automatically connecting to those vertices. So it kind of looks wonky with your cursor. You have this little red dot that's going all over the place, and my mask tool is still jacked up, which is very annoying. I'm just kind of taking the draw mask tool, going around there, kind of get the general shape of the cross. Opacity back up there, and I'm just going to color this in. I ended up not even doing this. It's kind of pointless, but you can kind of get the idea. It's always funny to me and challenging to see how accurate of a drawing I can get, because believe it or not, with all my 3D models, I still haven't switched over to a stylus and a tablet. I've been looking to, but what I want to do is I want to get a really, really nice handheld tablet that I can use when I'm traveling. We go on family trips regularly and stuff like that, and I want to be able to have a nice handheld, really powerful tablet that I can run ZBrush on, when I'm in the airport or when I'm at my in-laws or going on a family trip or something like that, when we're driving and my wife is driving and I'm riding in the passenger seat or something like that. So I haven't upgraded to the Wacom tablet that you could obviously hook up to your computer in your home. I actually taught myself how to 3D model using the mouse and keyboard, because back when I started, I didn't have the money to spend on a tablet and a stylus, and I still, to this day, all the 3D models that I've created have all been created using a mouse and keyboard. And although I do want to transition to the stylus side of things, I just haven't done that yet. And I know that the technology is coming along with 3D modeling with a tablet and a stylus in a portable way, but I still don't think the tablet that I'm looking for really exists yet, as far as the capability and the resources that tablet has. I've been really close to pulling the trigger on the Microsoft Surface Pros. I think the Surface Pro 3 is out now, and it seems to be pretty high quality. There's not a lot of videos out there of people installing ZBrush on tablets, but I'm going to give it a shot here before too long, once I get a few more projects done, spend the money, and see if I can make it work. Anyway, you can see how I use the mask tool to kind of get an idea of how I wanted the cross to look. And once I get it adjusted the way that I want it, I'm going to go ahead and mask off the back here. And now you can see that it's not on the back side as well, because we don't need it to be. I'm going to go to the deformation tab and use the negative inflate tool. And then I'm going to inflate that into the cylinder. Now, like I said earlier, there's many ways you can do this. You could have created the cross in Fusion360, imported that cross, and then you could have used it with the Boolean cutout and input it into the cylinder, and then you could cut away at the cylinder with the cross you created and import it in. I know there's a lot of people that use Maya to do similar things, create generic objects in Maya and then import them into ZBrush and then manipulate them from there. I tend to do that with Fusion360 in a lot of ways, but I decided to use the deformation tab and use the negative inflate. And mind you, I use the negative inflate, not inflate bubble, because the inflate bubble tends to distort the inflation. I wanted the selection to be a lot more crisp and clean. Now what I'm doing is turning down the draw size and the Z intensity of the smooth tool by holding down Shift and left click. And I'm kind of cleaning up those edges of the cross. I tried to do it with the smooth inside the deformation tab, but it didn't work out the way that I wanted it to. So now I'm just kind of adjusting the draw size and the Z intensity and doing it manually. And it ends up turning out just fine. Mind you, this model is going to be really, really small. So if there is any type of weird texture down in there, it's not going to be noticeable. I believe it looks pretty accurate, pretty close to the original. Again, technically I free-handed it, you know what I mean? So I'm happy with the way that it turned out. So the next thing that I'm going to end up doing here is going into the base shape of the model, the case, and I'm going to start creasing edges. I'm back in the Zmodeler brush, and I'm going to hover over a poly loop line, and I'm going to hold down spacebar, and then I'm going to select crease, and then I'm going to select one. I'm just on single edge loop right now, but I'm going to go to edge loop partial. And what that does is follows that exact same poly loop line until it comes to a different angle, and then it stops. So right now I'm on a single edge loop. I'm going to hold down the space bar here and you'll see me flip back and forth between high resolution and low resolution, just so that I can see how the model is reacting to the creases that I'm putting in. So if you get annoyed with that, that's the reason why, is because, you don't always know how the model's going to react until you do it. And that's why, Control Z, Control Shift Z is really important in a lot of ways when you're using the Zmodeler brush or any other type of 3D modeling in ZBrush. But you'll see that I hover back over here and I select edge loop partial. So there, it actually follows that exact same linear path, that edge loop all the way down. And then I'll be able to crease a longer section of the edge loop. A little tricky getting into these tight sections sometimes, so the more you work with the Zmodeler brush, the more you'll get familiar with how to manipulate and use the tools in that spacebar menu. And I encourage you to just go in and play around and get familiar with it and just create any type of object. Not really, you don't necessarily have to shoot for creating something extravagant. You can just kind of pull and drag and move and crease and use all the different tools to get familiar with the Zmodeler brush. But the Zmodeler brush is just invaluable. It's an incredible brush inside of ZBrush, and I see a lot of people not utilize it as much as what I think they should, because of how powerful it is. Anyway, I'm going to be quiet here and just speed up the video, and you kind of get the idea. All I'm doing is hovering over a line where it turns white, and whenever it turns white, that's the line you're going to manipulate. And right now I'm just dragging these vertices points. You can actually select the move tool on the brush menu down low, but the move tool is already selected inside the Zmodeler menu. So I'm just grabbing those corners and those vertices and dragging them around to where I want them and getting them in place. Anyway, like I said, I'm going to speed up the video and go through this entire last half of the video is me just creasing lines and dragging and moving and going to low resolution and high resolution so that I can see how it's going to look whenever it's all done. What the crease does before I take off and speed up the video, the crease just constrains that line to keep it as close to 90 degrees as possible based upon those constraints. And you'll see right here, I'll add that constraint, high res, and you'll see how it manipulates that line. Anyway, again, if y'all have any questions on how to use the Zmodeler tool, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to help you any way that I can. And if there's enough people that request it, maybe I'll just go straight in, generic, short, 5-10 minute video, 15-minute video of just using the Zmodeler tool to create different objects inside of ZBrush. All right, we're getting pretty close to the end here. I'm just saving a couple different versions of the model before I combine all the different subtools. Ultimately, this is just a static object. It's not going to be something that opens and closes, no moving parts or anything like that. So I want it to just be 3D printable all as one part. So all I'm doing right now is just kind of zooming in, looking at the different objects and how they interact with one another. And what I'm going to do here in just a few minutes is increase the resolution, re-dynamesh it, and I believe what I end up doing is taking all the different subtools and all the way up to 200 or 2000 resolution. You can see right here the comparison between the original and the one that I created. A few differences, not a big deal. Subtext is a little bit different than the original, but I think it's pretty close for what I'm trying to do, and I'm pretty happy with it. So now what I'm going to do is start to merge the different assets, and I believe I started to merge them and then I needed to undo it because I didn't have them all the same resolution. What I tend to do whenever I'm merging assets, just to make sure that there aren't any hiccups or problems, is I tend to set them all to the same resolution. It seems to me that the program responds a little bit better whenever all the objects that you are merging, all the different subtools that you're merging have the same resolution. So I try to re-dynamesh all the objects with the same resolution. For some reason my computer was running a little bit slow yesterday, so this process is taking a little bit longer than what it normally does. So bear with me here. All right, now that I've got all the subtools changed over to 2000 resolution, I'm going to go ahead and save another version of the file before I merge them all down. This just cuts down on problems that end up being created and going back and having to redo some work. So I saved it before I changed the resolution of all the models or all the subtools, and then before I merge them, I go ahead and save it again. That way I don't have to go back and redo it. Sometimes when you're saving, sometimes when you're merging in ZBrush, occasionally you'll get a crash. The reason I do these take these steps are because I've had problems with them in the past. Whenever I try to merge objects, the programs crash and I lose 20, 30 minutes, an hour worth of stuff that I've been working on. So anytime I'm working on a 3D model, I tend to save pretty regularly in a bunch of different versions of the files. Fortunately, the merging process didn't crash. ZBrush is an amazing program. I'm not knocking it or anything like that, but there's always problems. You can see how it hangs up right here whenever I re-dynamesh once all the files are merged, and it takes a little bit to kind of make up its mind about combining all the subtools. All right, now that they are all combined and good to go, you can see the finished product of the model here. I'm going to go ahead and spin it around a little bit. You can see that all the assets are combined. I went ahead and auto grouped everything. Now it's all one solid piece, and all I have to do from this point on is go into the decimation. I can't remember if I actually go into that in this video, but anyway, that is the 3D model. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions for me, please leave them in the comments below. I really appreciate y'all watching the video. It really means a lot to me, and I spend a lot of time working on these 3D models, recording them and editing them, so please give me some feedback. It really helps me out. And also, if you have any requests for videos in the future, something that you've been struggling with and something that whenever others explain it, maybe they don't explain it the way that's easy for you to understand it, or maybe they're using the terms that you don't quite understand, because there is a big learning curve with ZBrush, and it does take a long time to understand what you're doing and understand how to ask the question the right way so that you get the correct answer, because the verbiage, the nomenclature, the words and how that's described, what you're trying to do and fix and change and stuff like that are very difficult to understand sometimes. Whenever I started teaching myself and learning ZBrush by utilizing YouTube and stuff like that, I didn't know the right terms to search for to understand what I was trying to fix or learn. So please don't be afraid to reach out and put things in layman's terms for me, and I'll do my best to help you out any way that I can. Thank you very much, and I hope y'all have a great day.